Hello, dreamer. I'll be your storyteller tonight. Like and subscribe for more bedtime stories and share in the comments where you're listening from. I thought I had scored the deal of a lifetime. You don't just stumble onto a cheap apartment in the city, at least not one that isn't crawling with cockroaches or falling apart at the seams. But somehow, I did. The ad looked almost too good to be true. 2-bedroom apartment, decent location, rent split in half. The only catch was that the current tenant, some guy named Daniel, was looking for a roommate he could trust. I should have known right then that something was off. When people use words like trust in rental ads, it usually means don't ask questions. But I was desperate. And when you're broke, desperation feels a lot like bravery. I met Daniel on a rainy Thursday evening. He was normal, or at least he seemed that way, tall, thin, hair combed neatly. He wore a plain gray hoodie and smiled politely when I shook his hand. His apartment was simple, clean, almost sterile. No photos on the walls, no decorations, just bare furniture and closed blinds. "This is the room," he said, showing me the second bedroom. It was empty except for a mattress on the floor. But I didn't care. I signed the papers the same night. Looking back, it feels like I was signing something else. Not a lease, but a sentence. Living with Daniel wasn't quiet. Too quiet. He kept to himself, rarely spoke, never invited anyone over. At first I thought it was perfect. I'd had roommates before, loud partiers, messy drunks, people who forgot to pay rent. Compared to them, Daniel was a dream. But the silence started to get under my skin. He never ate when I ate. I'd cook dinner and he'd just stand in the kitchen filling a glass of water, then disappear into his room. He never opened the blinds. If I left them open in the morning, by the time I got home, they'd be shut again. And that door of his, always locked, I brushed it off at first. Everyone deserves their privacy. But eventually, privacy started to feel like secrecy. Then came the whispers. At exactly 3 a.m., almost every night, I'd hear him. Low, steady, not English. Not Spanish. Not anything I recognized. It wasn't like someone talking on the phone. It was rhythmic. Like chanting, and every time I pressed my ear to the wall, my chest would tighten, like my body knew I wasn't supposed to be hearing it. I told myself it was nothing. Sleep deprivation, thin walls, maybe he was into meditation or some weird hobby. But deep down I knew this wasn't normal. One night I came home earlier than usual. It was raining again, the kind of cold, sticky rain that soaks your clothes before you even get through the door. I just wanted to crash on the couch and forget the world. But the second I opened the door, it hit me. A smell so strong I gagged. Rot. Rust. Like blood left too long in the sun. It was so thick in the air it felt alive. It clung to the walls, to my clothes, to my skin. The apartment was pitch dark. But one thing stood out immediately. Daniel's door. The one that was always locked. It was wide open. I should have left. I should have turned around and walked straight back out. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. And mine pushed me across the hallway and through that open door. The room was nothing like the rest of the apartment. Candles covered the floor, burning low, their wax dripping like pale veins across the carpet. The shadows they threw stretched across the walls, twisting like they were alive, and those walls, they weren't just scratched. They were carved symbols, letters that weren't letters, shapes that bent the eye if you looked at them too long, like they were meant to be unreadable, and in the middle sat a chair, old wooden, its surface dark and soaked. At first I thought it was just stained, but then I saw the shine. Wet, fresh, blood. The air felt wrong, heavy, pressing down on me like the room itself wanted me out. My heart hammered, my throat locked. I couldn't even breathe. That's when I felt it. He was standing behind me. I don't know how he moved so quietly. One moment the room was empty. The next, he was there. Daniel, smiling, eyes too wide, teeth too sharp, and in his hand, a knife. He leaned close, so close I felt his breath on my ear, and he whispered, "You weren't supposed to see this." Something inside me broke. I didn't think. I didn't breathe. I ran through the kitchen, out the front door, into the rain-soaked streets. I don't even remember dialing 911. But somehow, I did. By the time the cops showed up, I was shaking so hard I could barely talk. They went in, guns drawn, flashlights sweeping, and then they came out, empty-handed. "There's nothing in there," the officer told me. No candles, no carvings, no chair, nothing. I couldn't believe it. I'd seen it. I knew what I'd seen. But when I went back inside, the room was clean, bare, empty. Daniel stood in the hallway, calm as ever, hands in his pockets, smiling, like nothing had happened. They questioned him, but what could they do? No evidence, no crime. They left, and he stayed. A week later, I moved out, packed my bags in silence. Didn't say a word to him, but I knew he was watching. I could feel his eyes on me the entire time. Now it's been months. I live 3 blocks away, and I still see him sometimes at the grocery store, at the gas station, standing across the street at night, smiling, waving, like we're still friends. And the worst part? Some nights at exactly 3 a.m., I still hear him whispering. But now, it's not coming from his room, it's coming from inside my walls. When I first moved into the hostel, I carried both relief and unease in my chest. The city was unfamiliar. The people were strangers. The building itself was cold, silent, like it had secrets buried in its walls. The room assigned to me was ordinary enough. Whitewashed walls, a single bed, a desk in the corner. The air smelled faintly of dampness, but it wasn't unbearable. There was only one thing that stood out. A mirror. It was old, framed with dark wood, fixed directly into the wall opposite my bed. The glass was scratched, its surface cloudy in places. I asked the warden, "Can I take this down?" "It looks creepy." Her expression hardened instantly. "No, that mirror stays, always." There was finality in her tone. Enough that I didn't dare question her again. That night I lay in bed with the mirror facing me, its dull reflection swallowing the room. I tried not to look at it. I tried not to imagine it watching me. At midnight my eyes shot open. The air was unnaturally still. Even the sound of wind had faded. My gaze slid unwillingly to the mirror and I froze. My reflection was awake. But I hadn't moved. I blinked, slowly, deliberately. The figure in the mirror did not blink back. Its eyes stayed wide, unbroken, unblinking, boring into mine. My chest tightened. I rolled over, forcing myself not to look again. I told myself it was exhaustion, my mind playing cruel tricks, but deep down I knew something wasn't right. The following night I felt it again, that oppressive silence, like the air itself was listening, and then I saw it, my reflection, smiling. But I wasn't. My lips were pressed tight in dread. But the me in the glass grinned from ear to ear, teeth bared in a grotesque parody of joy. The smile widened, almost cracking its face in two. My stomach dropped. I bolted upright, heart hammering. I couldn't stay in that room. Not with it. I spent the rest of the night in the hostel lobby, pacing until dawn. When morning came, I convinced myself again. Fatigue, stress, nothing more. But the memory of that smile gnawed at me all day. Days blurred into nights. The reflection grew bolder. Sometimes it blinked when I didn't. Sometimes it raised its hand when mine remained still. Sometimes it whispered. But the glass muffled the words. I couldn't take it anymore. I went to the warden again. "This mirror, it's wrong. Something's in it." The warden's face turned pale. She whispered, "We've all seen it, but the mirror cannot be removed." That night, the nightmare reached its peak. I was lying on my bed when I saw my reflection move forward. Not mimic, not copy, move. It pressed its palm against the glass. The surface rippled like water disturbed, and then it stepped through. The figure, my perfect double, stood in my room. Its smile stretched in the dim light. Before I could scream, darkness swallowed me. My body felt heavy, pulled backward, sinking. When I opened my eyes, I was inside. Inside the mirror. From behind the glass, I watched helplessly. The other me looked around my room, adjusted her clothes, then sat calmly on the bed. She looked exactly like me. Every detail, every movement except the smile. There was a knock on the door. The warden entered. She glanced around, her eyes falling on the girl sitting quietly on the bed. The imposter. Relief washed over her face. "You're settling in fine," she said gently before leaving again. "No one suspected a thing," I screamed. I banged against the mirror. My fists struck glass until they bled, but no sound left the prison. The other me turned her head and winked. The next morning, my diary lay open on the desk. It was the last thing I'd written before being taken. If you ever see me smiling, it isn't me, but my parents never noticed when I called them. My friends never noticed when I laughed more than usual. No one ever noticed the difference because she looked like me, talked like me, lived like me, while the real me still claws against the glass begging to be freed. And if you ever catch your reflection smiling, when you're not, you'll know. It's already watching. When I first moved into the university hostel, I thought I'd finally escape the chaos of home. The room was small but livable. A narrow bed, a desk pressed against the wall, a single window where the city's weak glow spilled in at night. But it wasn't the room that unsettled me. It was the hallway. During the day, it looked ordinary. Long, narrow, lined with identical doors. A place students hurried through, arms full of books, laughter echoing briefly before fading away. But at night, everything changed. The hallway grew too quiet. The silence felt heavy, like it pressed against your skin, like the air itself was waiting. The very first night, I carried my suitcase down that hall alone. My footsteps echoed unnaturally loud. And then, I heard another set of footsteps behind me. I froze, slowly turned. The corridor stretched out empty. Shadows pooled in the corners. No one was there. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me to my room. The second night, thirst woke me around midnight. I stepped out with an empty water bottle, planning to fill it from the dispenser near the stairwell. The corridor was dim, lit by a single flickering bulb overhead. The silence was so complete I could hear my own breath. And then I heard them, whispers. Low, layered voices that seemed to rise from the very walls. Not one voice, many. Murmuring all at once like a crowd pressed close behind me. I froze mid-step. My ears strained. The whispers were right there, brushing my neck. But when I turned, nothing. The corridor lay empty. The shadows were still. I forced myself to walk faster, gripping my bottle so tight my knuckles whitened. But the whispers followed, growing louder, surrounding me. By the time I reached my room, I was trembling so badly I nearly dropped the key. Inside, I locked the door, pressed my back against it, and listened. The whispers stopped the moment I stepped inside, like they knew I was safe. For now. On the third night, I promised myself it was in my head. Stress, fatigue, overthinking. But then I saw it. At the far end of the corridor, where the light faded into darkness, something stood. A shadow. It wasn't flat like the kind cast by light. It had shape, mass, tall, thin, its limbs too long, its outline trembling like smoke. My breath hitched. I couldn't move, and then it did. The shadow took one step toward me, then another. Its movements were wrong, jerky, broken, as if its joints bent the wrong way. I stumbled backward, heart slamming against my ribs. My door was only a few feet away, but the corridor stretched on endlessly, each second dragging like an hour. The shadow moved faster. I lunged into my room, slammed the door, locked it with shaking hands, and then I heard it. Tap, tap on the other side. It was standing there, waiting. That night, sleep never came. At 3 a.m., the knocking started. Knock, knock, soft, gentle. My throat went dry. "Who's there?" I whispered, praying it was a neighbor. Silence. Then again. Knock. Knock. This time harder. I crept to the window and pulled the curtain back. The corridor outside was empty. Nothing but dim light and peeling walls. But when I looked down, my blood froze. Beneath the crack of the door, shadows shifted. Not one shadow, many. Stretching, writhing like hands pressed against the floor. I clamped a hand over my mouth, fighting a scream. Whatever stood outside wasn't human. By morning, I couldn't keep it inside. I found the warden and blurted everything out. About the whispers, the shadow, the knocking at my door. Her expression changed instantly. Fear flickered in her eyes. "You live at the end of the hall, don't you?" she asked. I nodded. She lowered her voice. "There was a girl once. She had your room. One night she walked down that hallway and never came back. They searched for weeks. No body, no trace. Only her shadow remained. Her words stuck to me like ice. That night I dreamed. The shadow entered my room. Its body stretched, curling along the walls. It leaned over me, its faceless head inches from mine. I woke with a scream, and then I noticed. Something was missing. When I stood in the dim light, the floor beneath me was bare. My shadow was gone. Since that night, nothing has been the same. I walk through campus like everyone else. I smile, I talk. I laugh when people expect me to, but I don't cast a shadow. People notice. They don't say it outright, but I catch their glances, the way their smiles falter. You look different, they say, like you're not yourself anymore. And they're right, because whatever walks beside me in the dark now isn't me. At night, I pass mirrors and see it, a second shadow standing just behind me, detached, watching. Sometimes when the lights flicker, I catch it smiling, and I know, one day soon, it will step fully into my place, and no one will ever notice the difference. When I first moved into the dorm, I thought my biggest worries would be exams and homesickness. I didn't expect him, Daniel, my new roommate. At first glance, he looked perfectly ordinary. Average height, dark hoodie, pale skin that made him look like he hadn't seen the sun in years. He didn't talk much, just nodded when I introduced myself and went back to unpacking his things. The room was small but decent. 2 beds, 2 desks, a single window where the streetlight outside flickered like it was trying to warn me. The first night, I lay awake, nervous in the new place. That's when I noticed it. Daniel never got into bed. He sat at his desk, hands folded neatly, staring at the blank wall. I waited. Maybe he was just thinking. Maybe he'd move eventually. But by the time I drifted into an uneasy sleep, he was still there. And when I woke hours later, sunlight spilling through the blinds, he hadn't moved an inch, eyes wide open, still staring. At first, I brushed it off. Some people had weird sleeping patterns, insomnia, stress. It wasn't my business. But days passed, and the unease grew. I never saw him eat, not once. Plates in the cafeteria, pizza boxes in the lounge, Daniel never touched them. His desk stayed bare, no snacks, no bottles. He didn't shower either. The bathroom in our hall was always busy, but he never lined up. Never carried a towel, and he never left the room. Morning classes, evening hangouts, weekend trips to the city. Daniel was always there, sitting, watching, waiting. At night, I pretended to sleep, lying as still as possible under my blanket. My heart pounded in my chest. I would peek through slits in my eyelids just enough to see. He sat upright at the desk, lips moving silently, whispering words I couldn't make out. Sometimes his head would twitch. Sharp, jerky movements, like his body didn't quite know how to be human. And then, the worst moments, when his lips stopped moving, and his head turned slowly toward me, eyes wide, fixed, watching me breathe. I squeezed my eyes shut every time, praying, begging the night to end. And each morning when I opened them again, Daniel was already awake. Still sitting, still watching. The tension ate at me. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe sleep deprivation was twisting things. I needed proof. One night I set up my phone camera on my desk, angled to catch him in frame. I told myself I was being dramatic, but my hand shook as I pressed record. Hours later, morning light slipped in. My phone was dead, completely drained. I plugged it in, opened the footage. At first, nothing. Just Daniel sitting there staring as always. Then the movement started, his head tilted. Slowly, unnaturally, until it twisted all the way around. Bones cracking like dry branches. His face now facing backward, eyes burning white in the glow of the streetlight, and then his mouth opened. It didn't stop. Wider, wider. His jaw unhinged, stretching impossibly far until his face was a dark, gaping void. The camera began to shake. Violently, like something on the other side of the screen was pulling it in. Then, static. The footage ended. When I tried to replay it, the file was gone, erased. My phone screen flickered, then died completely. It never turned back on. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. That evening, I went to the dorm supervisor's office. A middle-aged woman with tired eyes hunched over paperwork. "I need to ask about my roommate," I said, voice trembling. "Daniel." Her pen froze mid-stroke. Slowly, she lifted her gaze. "There is no Daniel assigned to your room." I forced a laugh. "No, really. He's tall, pale, black hoodie. He's been living with me all week." The color drained from her face. She whispered, almost to herself, "That's impossible." My stomach turned. "What do you mean?" She leaned closer, voice dropping. "Someone by that name lived in your room once. But he died 3 years ago." My breath caught. I wanted to scream at her, call her a liar, but the fear in her eyes was real. I rushed back to my room, heart pounding. The hallway seemed longer than ever. Shadows stretched along the walls, reaching for me. When I pushed open the door, it was empty. Daniel's bed, sheets perfectly made, untouched. No clothes, no belongings, as if no one had ever slept there. That night I left the lights on, sat in bed, knees pulled to my chest, waiting. At 2 a.m. the bulb flickered, and then he was there. Daniel, sitting at the foot of my bed, closer than ever before, his face twisted into something that almost resembled a smile. For the first time he spoke. His voice was a low rasp like dry leaves scraping against each other. "You shouldn't have told anyone." I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. His hand reached out, cold as ice, fingers wrapping around my throat. The light went out, and the darkness swallowed me whole. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I woke, morning light filled the room. Everything looked normal, calm. But the mirror on the wall told a different story. In the reflection, Daniel sat at his desk, smiling, watching, waiting. I spun around. Nothing. The chair was empty, but in the glass he was still there. And now, every night, when the lights go out, I feel him, sitting close, breathing, whispering. No one else can see him, but I know he's real, because sometimes when I catch my reflection in the mirror, I see his eyes staring back at me.